All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Nathan, nice to have you with us. We always start with introductions. After a while, it'll feel like you know everybody. It'll be like, why do we do it? But we do it anyway. So we're going to start with introductions right there.
Ken DeWeer, Fillmore Township.
But I can't, Zealand Township.
Howard Bauman, Port Sheldon Township.
Tyler Kent, MDOT, Grand Region.
Sally Griffin, City of Zealand.
Linda Howell, Lakeville.
Honest Myers of the MAC.
Nathan Bach, City of Holland.
Judy Vischer, the MAC.
David Van Genoven with the MAC.
Jim Story, Allegan County Board of Commissioners.
Tom Bird, Ottawa Road Commission.
Pankaj Rajagopal with the MAC.
Joe Bauman, out of Ottawa County Board of Commissioners.
Terry Nienhuis, Holland Township.
Skip Keeter, Park Township.
Beth Higgs, Macatawa Area Express.
Thank you. Staff at the front, please.
Kelly Goward with the MAC. Carolyn Alston with the MAC.
Ron DeCook. DeCook, Governmental Policy and Strategies. I'm a consultant on transportation.
John Eaglehoff from the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission.
The MAC, please.
Harpan Lobo with the Holland Sentinel.
Mara Garrity with the MAC.
Rob Vink with the MAC.
All right, thank you. Nathan, we welcome you. Sally, you and I have known each other only about 30 years. Nice to have you here. Okay, you have a copy of the minutes, so unless there's a questions, I will take a motion.
Second.
Any clarifications? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public who would like to make comments? All right, hearing none, we welcome John Egelhoff, who is the Executive Director of Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, and he's going to talk to us about the train study. So, welcome.
Thank you. I've been prompted to connect, and because I'm connected, I won't be roaming around. How are we doing? Any way to know if the levels are right? Okay. Well, I've been asked, thank you, by the way, for inviting me to speak. I've been invited to speak generally on the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, and then embedded in my presentation is a conversation about passenger rail on the Pierre Marquette line. So they're all sort of mixed together. But I'm starting with the general conversation about what we're doing at the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. We are not dissimilar from the MAC. The MAC is an MPO, Metropolitan Transportation Planning Organization. We are as well, but we are also a regional planning organization. So we have a couple of different MPO regions embedded within the geography of our planning region. So that hopefully sets things up, and then I'll sort of walk you through what that actually turns out to mean. So we'll start with a regional snapshot. We probably don't need to do a lot of detail here, but you can see in the inset map in the bottom left corner, there we are, Southwest Michigan, 3 counties, Berrien, Cass, and Van Buren. And let's see, within those counties, there are a couple of different urbanized areas that make up the MPO. So you can see in the Benton Harbor area, I don't know if the pointer, yeah, good. So this is the Benton Harbor St. Joe area. That's one of our MPOs. And the other is the South Bend area as it sort of migrates over the state line and into Niles and Buchanan. So those are our 2 MPO areas. We like you, are very agrarian down there in the southwest corner. So we thought we'd just sort of throw out a bunch of the town seals from our region and how many of them include some kind of fruit or vegetable, just to sort of prove our point. Oh, and then we could brag about where we rank across the state in the production of certain fruits and vegetables, but I won't waste your time with that. There's also issues of poverty in our region. And I could kind of go into this, but we do sort of map those and keep close tabs on that, and really understand that we are an area of need. There are pockets of need in our region. Benton Harbor, very specifically, one of them, really generational issues of poverty in Benton Harbor, and we have to be mindful of that. So the basics about the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. A vision to plan great communities together. One of the freedoms that being both an MPO and a regional planning organization give us is we don't have to always stretch hard to get beyond just a kind of transportation focus, which isn't to suggest the MACC doesn't do that either, but it's just we have a certain level of freedom because we can sort of Lego on other pieces that aren't historically and funding-wise specifically transportation. So we can speak broadly when we have a vision exercise like that derives our vision. Our mission is that the team uses its passion and expertise to connect people, assist communities, and advance cooperative solutions to regional challenges experienced by the communities that created us. So we are a creation, the Regional Planning Organization is a creation of the communities therein. The MPO is really, so it's there by federal sort of mandate. The Regional Planning Organization is really much more of a voluntary act by those communities. We have a list of values that's rather extensive here, but suffice it to say, we have documented the things that matter the most to us. And if there's one thing that I've learned, you don't put too many words on a slide. So there, I just violated one of my fundamental tenets. Work streams within our organization, you can see them all listed there. Transportation, environmental issues, community planning generally, data, expertise, and economic development. We try not to be too siloed. When I started at this organization, it was apparent that there had been too much of that, where the folks working on one project were not talking enough to the folks working on other projects. Now we've gotten to the point where a lot of our work kind of complements each other. So those folks who are really focused on transportation are informing the economic development planners about their work, so that we're really trying to be in concert with the work that we do and have the documentation that one side creates really kind of informed by the documentation and research of the other. So the transportation area, I'm just going to start there. 2 MPO study areas that, as I explained. We have rural transportation planning. That's also a feature of what we do. Harbor planning, because we have a deep water harbor, and that matters a lot. And it's really time to reimagine what that harbor needs to be. Regional rail, as I'll give you a little more detail on that here. And then transit planning as well. So we have a transit, we have in our 3 counties too many transit providers that are doing that work and sort of stumbling over each other. And we see an opening for ourselves to try to make that better, make it work better for the riders and potential riders. So let's start with regional rail, since I think it was really important for me to make sure I covered that. And I want to do it justice, because I think it is one of those areas where I've got 6 slides here, but I think I could have flipped the presentation and had it predominantly about passenger rail, because I think it's a really important asset that we need to recognize for all that it can bring us, and actually try to accentuate it even more than we do now. So we're going to talk a bit about the future of the Pure Marquette, but by setting it up with the present. So this is, in case a little better information we need to start with a little base of information. There are 3 existing passenger rail services, Amtrak passenger rail services in Michigan. There is they connect Chicago with 3 different endpoints in Michigan. One would be the Pure Marquette, that's critical for us in the room. And then the Blue Water that connects Chicago to Port Huron. So there, it's the blue line, sort of diverging in Kalamazoo. and then the Wolverine that connects Chicago to Detroit, Pontiac. So you can see the endpoints there. Let's go back and make sure we. Okay, good. So most of you know the Pere Marquette well. I mean, we're obviously featuring that in this conversation. There we are in St. Joe, Benton Harbor. Don't be misled by this dot here. We'll get into that. But the Pere Marquette whizzes right past New Buffalo and goes right into Chicago. So my stop in Benton Harbor, St. Joe, is the last station stop before it heads into Chicago. In 2004, there was a really important study that happened, and that was actually the year after I started at the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. There was a sort of a coalition of passenger rail stakeholders that got together and met on the future of rail throughout the Midwest. And there was a recommendation to upgrade the Wolverine to 110 mile per hour service, and that upgrade is largely complete in the years since 2004. There was a second recommendation to change the Pere Marquette alignment to include stops that were Holland, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Niles, Chicago. So you can see what it did to the Pere Marquette, or at least in theory what it did. It took the passenger rail line and bent it away from the shore and straight up to Holland and Grand Rapids. This is the recommendation anyway. That change would discontinue service, as I said, in Bangor and St. Joe. And it would turn that service from rail to a bus service that would connect instead of Benton Harbor, St. Joe, busing up to Holland. It would bus down to Niles and then rail from there. So this was the proposal. What we've learned was that in 2004, the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission was not an active member of the Pere Marquette advocacy group that is known as WestTrain. WestTrain is something that I assume most of you know about, but and the MACC is a critical member of that. It is made up of the development authorities, or the economic development groups of each of the major station stop areas, and the MPO, or regional planning organizations, from each of those station stops. Well, that sounds good, except it turned out that the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission was not one of the members at that point in 2004 when this regional rail system executive report was rendered. That report was given to the MACC, or not the MACC, but but WestTrain, for consideration. What do you all think about this change? Do you think it looks good? And what turned out from WestTrain was, well, it looks okay to us. And MDOT heard that that's our choice, that the folks in West Michigan like this change. And when we found out about it, we thought, wait a minute, our voice wasn't in there, and we don't like it very much. So since this point, we have stirred up trouble. We've become part of WestTrain. We've gotten MDOT's Director of Passenger Rail to actually come to St. Joe and Benton Harbor, and we got a bunch of our folks, residents there, to attend a meeting, have MDOT explain this, and hear us. Since that point, the Director of Passenger Rail now understands loud and clear that that doesn't sit very well with us. And then since then, too, we've been an active and hopefully a good partner in WestTrain to add our voice to that. Okay, so the future of the Pere Marquette, though, has not been decided yet. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just because that report has been rendered doesn't mean it's a done deal. So let's talk a little bit about the future of the Pere Marquette. It runs on freight quality tracks that are not maintained for high speed. So there's no intention on the Pere Marquette that CSX freight doesn't ever plan to go 110 miles an hour. So they don't have to build out their infrastructure to accommodate those speeds versus the other Amtrak lines. The lack of infrastructure investment equals less speed, less reliability, and less safety. They just don't have to rise to that passenger level standard. The existing stations have a relatively small population base. Also the existing stakeholders must lead the way into a more efficient, reliable, and safe future, or we won't be heard at all. If it comes to what the boarding statistics are and how many folks are actually riding and picking up the train in those station stops, that's not going to be where we're going to win. But passenger rail service in Michigan needs to be a healthy ecosystem where many options cover a lot of destinations, and that there is room and need for the existing 3 routes. We have to make that clear. So let's talk some more about that. The station stop, if you noticed on that map, and I pointed that out at New Buffalo, the station stop on the Wolverine and Blue Water routes does not include the Pier Marquette. So as I said, you get on in St. Joe and you go right past New Buffalo and right into Chicago. Well, that sounds great if that's your intended destination. But what if you get it on in St. Joe and you actually want to go to Pontiac? Well, you have to ride all the way into Chicago and then ride all the way back out again to Pontiac. This isn't great for Michiganders necessarily. It's good for Chicago folks who can pull Michigan traffic into Chicago. But if we're looking to improve quality of life in Michigan, we're not doing that. We're lighting up New Buffalo as a stop where all of those lines can unite in one place, and then Michigan people can circulate around the state as they so desire. So the Wolverine and Blue Water on Chicago Hub high-speed corridor, they've got improved speeds to 110 miles an hour on track owned by Amtrak. So those routes headed east are in good shape on high speed, or will be very soon. The connection in New Buffalo connects CSX rail to Amtrak rail. So there's a critical question of rail ownership in here. There's also that, the Pier Marquette trains on the Amtrak owned 110 mile an hour service tracks between New Buffalo and Porter, Indiana. This point down here says that once you get past New Buffalo, you get those high speeds again. So if you're coming off of the Pier Marquette and you stop in New Buffalo, or you just get on into Buffalo and you happen to be going to Chicago, you're getting the advantage of that higher speed. The linkage for Southwest Michigan passengers to points east on the Wolverine and Blue Water, also a major asset of linking New Buffalo in. And the higher speeds mean the potential for more frequent trains. Now, when you sit and listen to the MDOT and the Amtrak folks talk long enough, you figure out that one of the critical pieces of frequency on the Pier Marquette has to do with how often they have to change over crews. And if the train runs slow, that means within a certain window of time, let's say a crew boards here and has to switch out here, they have that much time to run trains. And then it's a critical thing that, then they trade crews off, and that's a whole big thing. So if the trains move faster, that means you can have more frequency with the same crew on the train. So one of the things we really want to do is improve speeds for Pier Marquette so that we can have a second train frequency in there. So as it exists now, you get one line out of Holland that goes down the Pier Marquette and one line that goes back. That's a typical day. But what we'd love to see is 2 options going south and 2 options going back. What's necessary to do this, and one of the things we'll be asking you to consider today, is to support a feasibility and engineering study that considers the possibility, if you're going to connect all 3 lines into Buffalo, what does that take? And that really begins with a feasibility and engineering study. It's a necessary step to get to state and federal funding to actually fund infrastructure change. And it will establish the cost too. You wouldn't know how much to ask for if you don't do this feasibility study at the front end. So that's the setup for the Pierre Marquette conversation. If you can kind of park that a little bit, and we can certainly do a Q&A afterwards. And thankfully, Ron is here, who maybe together the two of us can answer most questions, I hope. But I'm going to go ahead and continue to finish the topic of what the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission is doing. I talked a little bit about the Deepwater Harbor. We've done a couple of important studies, one in particular that looked at possibility in the harbor. And I don't know how familiar our harbor is to you all, but it was a great place for heavy freight to move for a long time, the last century. We moved a lot of fruit through that harbor. We've also moved a lot of petroleum. Now we move a fair amount of gravel and sand through that harbor. So road building materials find a way in. It's also a good place for our nuclear plants to move really big stuff. And we think in the future it's probably a likely place where the big props on wind turbines can move through. So some of these things are really important ways for harbors to be a resource. Anyhow, we did this extensive study, and I can sort of whiz through it a little bit, but it was it was an interesting collaboration between Andrews University, which is in our region, in a really highly respected, nationally respected architecture program there. They did the study alongside the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission, and we've got some interesting sort of before and after. I just pulled a couple of them. This is one piece of the harbor. This is the main street running from St. Joe and into Benton Harbor. And this is Whirlpool here. They've built a new headquarters building right at the entrance of Benton Harbor. There's actually, since this photo was taken, there's another wing that's been built over here. So really, Whirlpool's worldwide headquarters making a real statement about their investment in Benton Harbor here. But just across the way, big pieces of the harbor that are sort of underutilized, let's say. And the study looks at those opportunities and says, you know, what's possible here? And really the idea was that these sometimes you can look at a photorealistic rendering like this and say, you know, you just put a bunch of pretty stuff there. But in fact, this is really based on a much more intensive study to understand what is actually possible, what's possible in the marketplace, and how would it be oriented to best utilize the infrastructure. So this is a careful conceptual rendering of what's really genuinely possible there. I think I've got another one here. This is the county courthouse building in St. Joe. So downtown St. Joe is right over here. This is the St. Joe, the confluence of the St. Joe River and the Pawpaw Rivers. And this is a steep slope from the courthouse down to the shore. And there's that road that I showed you before going into downtown Benton Harbor. Really kind of underutilized property there. Every lunch, all these people spill out and look for some place to eat. And so there's a healthy population of folks that are ready to be consumers at lunchtime and other times, and just enjoy the shore riverfront. So this is sort of a concept of what that might look like. We're in need of more boat slips, so you see that almost everywhere. There's a ped bridge and onto the other features in the harbor that beg for folks to appreciate them. So that's kind of our little wet your whistle kind of thing on our study. Environmental work. We do a lot of stormwater, wastewater asset management considerations. So the state incentivized that through their stormwater wastewater asset management funding that happened over the last bunch of years. We do water trail planning. We also do Pawpaw River. The Pawpaw River is an example of a water trail that we created, 63 miles of water trail that has been realized. And then terrestrial trail planning. So we incentivized the Indiana-Michigan River Valley Trail, which is the first bi-state trail in Michigan. I'm not sure that I'm going to go too much into depth on this project watching the time. This is I'll just give you the quick download on this project. One of the things that you figure out over time is that often our wastewater systems are compromised by on-site septic and other issues. And you see E. coli making its way into open waterways. And we had that situation where we had beach closures in our part of Southwest Michigan. Some of the most used beaches closed at the height of the summer because of E. coli. So it was time to really reverse engineer that, try to understand where that's coming from. And the problem with that is typically you'll take water samples, send them off to be tested, but that E. coli testing is really expensive, and it takes a while. So what we found was that there are E. coli sniffing dogs that have been trained to recognize certain strands of E. coli, and they can sniff it out. So we found some hotspots using these dogs. Then you take samples in those places, and they send it off to the lab, and they have more dogs that sniff the samples in the lab. And when the two dogs confer and agree, you have a E. coli hotspot. So we figured out a way to do it a lot cheaper and identify, we find the same target areas. So our study actually has really led to a bunch of communities figuring out they have a problem. The problem starts with them, and they're going to solve it together. So that was really interesting. So I hope this doesn't make you sick as I whiz through this quickly to get on. So a lot of digital mapping in our office, high-level GIS mapping and that kind of thing. So we're trying to connect our GIS mapping skills to good science and generating product that works for our communities. Economic development, we are an EDA planning district, so the U.S. Department of Commerce has the Economic Development Administration. We're kind of boots on the ground for the federal Economic Development Agency. We are investigating development corridors in our region. Where are we most primed for development that suits the kind of industrial development that we are most queued up for? So we're right in the midst of that study. Our Palisade, we have 2 nuclear power plants in our region. One of them is going to close soon, in 2022. And that's a really big deal. 600 jobs that are going to go away. And what does that all mean for us? And we're really in the process of kind of working through that. Rural broadband expansion, I don't know if you all are feeling it, but we have enough rural population that doesn't have broadband that it's really impacting us on an economic development level. So we're trying to solve that difficult challenge. And infrastructure asset management, something that is coming down the road very quickly. Used to be about roads almost exclusively, but Michigan is expanding their purview on what they think infrastructure asset management should apply to. So we're very much in the middle of that as well. Community planning, that's a sort of catch-all term for these 5 items that I've listed here. We do master planning for communities, rec planning, housing studies, health planning, and regional food stuff. So I talked about food and all the stuff we grow. Regional food is another one of those under-realized resources in our region. We make so much good food. Why doesn't it stay in our region? Why don't we do more with it? Open question. This is a study that we did on the impacts of health and how food and health are linked together, how we can improve the health of our region by reimagining certain facets of the way we plan, including the way food moves through, but also the way recreation is planned and transportation infrastructure is put on the ground. I have to apologize again. I'm going to whiz through this quickly because I don't think I should go into too much detail here. I know sometimes these prezzies, because they're in motion, some people look at them and they get a little sick. So close your eyes for a minute here. There we go. Okay, so I mentioned we have a lot of expertise for data in our region, in our office, and GIS mapping in particular. So you've seen pieces of that as I've gone through this. So there you go. That's the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission. And I don't suppose you have a lot of questions about the organization. Just wanted to set you up with that. I was asked to talk about that, so there you go. But really, it's probably as much or more about Pierre Marquette expansion and that kind of thing as anything. So, any questions?
And thank you again for letting us.
The only question I have about the Pere Marquette is, it's been a while since I've been through there. Are they running on the same tracks past that New Buffalo station, or would there have to be a rerouting of the Pere Marquette to go past the New Buffalo
Right
station?
after,
New Buffalo, would they merge onto the same track at some point? Is it right there?
The idea is it would merge at New Buffalo.
Does not currently.
Well, what, yeah, now currently,
It does not currently.
so they run on parallel track?
Well,
For a while?
No, they actually don't. They cross over in New Buffalo Township. But then the Wolverine continues on, and it runs between the shoreline and the downtown city. The Pere Marquette runs into the city on the, that'd be more of the east side, and then continues on. So they don't have any coordination there.
Thank you.
Sure. You can see I have to defer sometimes. There's details there that are just beyond me. Yes?
as I recall, the proposed study was about a $500,000 project.
That's the estimate.
I was somewhat taken back by that. When I first saw the number, I thought, well, that included completing the whole project. Do you have any idea in round numbers what the whole project would do if it were implemented? Are we talking $5 million?
Wow, good question. It's about property acquisition. It's about, actually laying track. It's about the different navigation systems that they use on the track itself. That is a total guess, isn't it? I mean, it really depends on so much that the study would tell us.
What the study comes up with. You really need to do that because then you'll have a lot more access to federal funds. That's the big component. Well, there's two components prior to trying to get federal funds for the project. Is you've got to have that data. You've got to have the feds know, and then bring that home, and they'll primarily be all the federal funds. It won't be anything state or local funds.
So MDOT knows, and it has been kind of coaching us along with what's necessary for us to get this change. And we know that this study is the critical linchpin. But honestly, being able to predict, the scale of the findings of the study is too big of a challenge for me to do. It's too important, in my opinion, to not do, because we don't get to that answer unless we do it. But to try to guess is just too hard. I guess I have another outlook on this, and it is similar. It fits into this kind of category of the master planning that we often do at the commission, where folks sometimes are reluctant to aspire because they put the dollar sign in front of the aspiration, and I think it needs to be the other way around. It's important to aspire first, to build the vision, and then to think about what the cost is going to be. And if you have to alter the vision in some respects in order to make the cost work, then it's not until you establish the vision and build the foundation under it that you can start to do that. So I would encourage to not be deterred by the possibility that it's going to be extremely expensive. More than likely it will be rather expensive, but like Ron said, that cost, the infrastructure cost on the backside will be borne not by us, but really by state government more than likely.
It's still our dollars.
Well, yeah, I don't want to ever, put that out there that we're not paying money into the state coffers to make it happen. But it is there. I mean, it's getting those dollars back to our region that we should be thinking about. We don't need to be a donor for the rest of the state all the time.
John, we have two resolutions in front of us. One is to support the feasibility and engineering study, and the other one is to support the railway. You want to explain a little more about those, or Ron?
No, I'd be glad to. There are two resolutions because one, and I think Ron is in a good position to augment what I say because he's much closer into the legislature. He was embedded in state government for a while and knows that territory and has a rapport with legislators and that kind of thing and department heads. I know I look at this much more from a regional perspective. But the idea here is to, let's start with the advocacy for passenger rail generally. I think it's important for us to represent back to our elected officials and others, even our citizens, that passenger rail is a critical piece of our infrastructure, that it may be in the background for a lot of folks, that they don't think about it. But all we have to do is get to $5 gas or get to some sort of scarcity on the other side for folks to realize that passenger rail is an extremely efficient, appropriate way for us to imagine our regional transportation system complementing all of its, not to be a sort of monoculture of cars driving on highways, but rather giving people choices that make a lot of sense for moving a lot of folks. So it's to remind some legislatures and other folks that it may be in the background, but it's not for us. We care about passenger rail. It matters, and this is our demonstration of that back to everyone. And then the second one is really fairly obvious. I mean, it's the study. It's us saying we know that this is a necessary step before we get to change in the infrastructure. We know you need this from us, and we would like to collaborate in the creation of the study that would make it possible to know. Now, there's other pieces of where those resolutions would go, who would see them, how they are actually going to support our case. And Ron may have some additional kind of input on that. Would you feel like you'd like to talk that through a little bit?
Sure. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
No, I probably talk more than I should anyway.
Well, that's usually my job.
I think you're good. Don't worry.
Okay. First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I really appreciate it. We've been working on this project, by we, I mean, it goes all the way back to MDOT, back in the 90s, that we're looking at how can we better utilize our rail system, especially the passenger rail system. And so when I was with MDOT for 8 years as their Director of Government Affairs. Just a quick background, before that I served 8 years with the County Road Association of Michigan as their Director of Government Affairs. Before that I was 8 years in the State Senate, working with, for our State Senator Bill Faust. Excuse me. And then, as I say, with MDOT, I served at the pleasure of the governor when Governor Granholm stepped down because of term limits. I had to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up next. And so what I came to find was I wanted to stay in transportation because I see our infrastructure is such a critical piece, not only for development and for mobility and for economic development, but you look at where the future is. And we know, millennials are not as big on cars as we were. We know they like transit. We know they like passenger rail service. We also know that in the areas outside of Michigan, Chicago or Canada, they come here as tourists or may own property or want to set up a business. And one of the things they're going to look at in trying to attract that in those businesses and industries into the state is you've got to have good transit systems and you've got to have a passenger rail service. And it needs to be efficient. And we're not efficient at this point other than on the Wolverine corridor. So this connectivity with with New Buffalo and the Pierre Marquette, if that were to be done, right off the bat, it's going to cut probably 15 minutes of time off the travel. Just because you're on that higher speed longer. And it's only a short distance, but it is longer. We also know that it will have to be, because it's not geared for 110 miles an hour, that equipment will have to be upgraded if we were to move forward with this. Now, the good news about that is those will be Michigan companies that will be doing that, engineering firms and others that will be doing that upgrade if we were to do it. That would be primarily federal funded. And it would take a couple years, but it's no different than what we've done in the Wolverine corridor. But once you've done that with the Pierre Marquette, now you're basically have created a commuter rail system between Grand Rapids and Chicago. Because you'll be able to take the train and get to Grand Rapids in at least by the same amount of time it would take you to drive, if not less, because of the speed that you would be having and the limited number of stops. So it's a.
I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to be mindful of time, so.
Yeah, we probably have just a couple, 3 minutes.
Okay, so know that, and know that, we want to get to the life of the resolutions, after
yep.
they're,
Sure.
if they're considered and are actually signed, where do
Yes.
they go and why?
Okay, the resolutions should go to your state representative and senators. Right now, we have $250,000 that we were able to put into the budget last year to do the rail study. So that's half the funding level. It has, because of the challenges between the legislature and the governor are in right now, they're going to be reviewing that rail study request. And we have a number of people on some of the committees that are just not interested in passenger rail service. They think we should get rid of all passenger rail service. So my interest is in making you aware of that, and these resolutions going to your state legislators saying, support the rail study, keep the $250,000. I would also point out that we have communities that have actually stepped forward and made pledges. One of the things I've been working on is going to communities, making these presentations. We have New Buffalo and New Buffalo Township that each have pledged $10,000 towards the study. And the reason we're doing this, just real quick, I'm kind of jumping around here, but we have, under the current administration in Washington, they changed the process by how you fund projects. With rail service, what they've done is it used to be a 50-50 match between the state and the feds. Well, now they've changed that to be you have to put in more than 50%. And then they rank you with other projects based on how much farther you go beyond that 50%. So at the federal level, they're spending less money for rail projects. At the state level, they're spending more. So, and also I think because in Michigan, my experience has been with the concern that legislators have of, well, do we really need passenger rail service? What I've tried to do with them and show that there's this interest and passion for having more rail service is I've started working with communities along the corridor to make pledges. They don't have to put any money, they just do a resolution, they pledge a certain amount of funding. When we apply for the Chrissy grant in, I think, mid-March or April, that's when we'll be asking, would you, sign we'll include that resolution to the feds to say that here's the money we've got available to match or to get our federal share to do the rail study. Yes, sir, you had a question?
I do. We have to move on because we pretty much have to, what's the word to look for?
Stay on track.
We have to stay on track. Thank you. That's why we want to stay on track. So we have two resolutions. I just have one is basically to support the railway. The other one is a feasibility study. I love what you said about Aspire, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask the question. Are you at some point seeking funds from the MACC?
No.
Okay.
No, that's really for the community, the individual communities to consider.
Yeah, I did talk with Tim Berkman.
Okay.
And about bringing this up to the MACC and asking for their endorsement.
Okay, good.
Because in talking with the Holland Zealand Community Foundation, yeah, thank you. I asked them, because I'm going to communities and foundations
Sure.
and that to ask. Their response was, well, we'd be interested. They at that time said, they said, well, how much would you think you would ask for a pledge? I said, being that you have a broad range here, would you consider $20,000? And they said, well, we could do that, but we don't, under what authority would we have? I said, well, and we got it in this discussion. Bottom line was, they said, well, look, we don't go outside of what the Macatawa wants. If they say that this is a good economic development piece for our area, then we are more comfortable making that pledge.
Got it, okay.
And so that's it.
Pretty great presentation. Love what you're doing down there. Very fascinating. I'm going to open it to members. I would say if we want to make one motion to support both 2002 and 2001, that would be open, or if you want to take them individually, we could do that as well. If there's interest.
What do you want, Dave?
A motion
I'll make that motion.
for both resolutions?
Yeah,
Great.
I'll support it.
Thanks, Skip. Okay, we have a motion to support the railway and the feasibility study. Are there any questions, concerns?
Question.
Yes, sir.
The resolution number 1, the last item, we strongly endorse and support the ultimate building of a rail connection. I'm struggling with how I can subscribe to that, not knowing what the scope of the project is.
You don't have to wonder about the scope. It is,
Or the cost.
the cost is a completely different point. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm not trying to throw, or blow smoke here. I don't know how much it would be, and I don't think anyone who is honest with you would know either. There may be some engineers out there that have a sense for scope. I'm not one of them, so I can't guess.
Okay, having worked with MDOT on this project before, several years ago when I was there, the scope, when it was proposed or discussed about a year ago was $500,000. That's.
He's talking about the build-out.
Oh, the build-out? Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Yes, we don't know until we get in there to do it. This is the key step to find that out. Then there'll have to be decisions made on does the department do it or not, just like they did with the Wolverine corridor to upgrade that and make it work.
Well, as you are well aware, the underfunding of the road system that we still live with on a daily basis, if this project comes in, pick a $10 billion, obviously I don't think anybody in the room would advocate spending $10 billion to do this.
I understand, but I think you've got two issues combined here. If, once the study is done and we know what the costs are and things like that, it will be federally funded. There may be some state funds involved, but it will be 90% federally funded at least. That's how we did the Wolverine corridor and how we are continuing to do it. It's all federal funds.
Well, again, my analysis at that point would be, once you come up with a number, where does it rank in my priority? If you're going to spend $1 billion of federal tax money for that, rather than investing it in other crumbling infrastructure, I might come to a different conclusion.
Well, keep in mind that nationally, passenger rail service projects are going like gangbusters all around the country, because this is the new, more efficient way to move people around. It attracts more business. I mean, without getting into all the boring details, I mean, there are studies after studies that would show how much you will attract in terms of economic development, what the passenger rate is. This study was done back in 2009, or 11. It's a little dated, but it was done by Amtrak and MDOT when I was there, and it verified that there is the ridership potential and the revenue potential if we were to do these kinds of things.
Good job. All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
I looked at this prior to the meeting. I had the same concern that Tom did with that last small paragraph. I think we could still support the engineering study without that last paragraph being in there.
Would we like to amend a motion to remove the last statement?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Tom, good point.
Just to add to what Tom said, though, there was some concern when the executive committee first heard of this study. There was concern about the cost of the study itself, $500,000, and how does it. And we're not looking for an explanation now, but it's a hefty price for a study, and just that you should acknowledge that concern.
I think the hope here is that when it goes out for proposals, when the request goes out, that perhaps we're off. Maybe the proposals come in well low of that. So that's another kind of a speculation about what the cost would be.
All right. We have a motion second. We remove the last part. Tom, thank you for your comment. You too, Howard. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. I just want to say, there's an interesting book about how the interstate highway was put in, how many years it took to do that, and all the iterations that it made. It's the same kind of thing for this. There's always a lot of concern on cost, but you have to start somewhere. Aspiration was a good point. I appreciate that a lot. And thanks for the member comments. This was a long presentation. We're going to try and be out of here by 1:15. We're going to try. Kelly. Very well done, though, gentlemen. Enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks again for having us.
You bet.
All right, good morning. I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly. So the presentation that I'm going to give, I'm giving full credit to the person that created it, John Beard from Public Sector Consultants. He gave this presentation to a group of our West Michigan Watershed Collaborative representatives on September 24. So I will try to run through this pretty quickly. I have more detail I can share after, and you'll get copies of the slides will be posted. So that's just a little bit about Public Sector Consultants, but then just briefly kind of the brief history of this project. It was in the fall of 2014 that the MACC, together with the Grand Valley Metro Council and the West Michigan Shoreline Regional Development Commission, submitted a proposal to the West Michigan Prosperity Alliance to receive Regional Prosperity Initiative funding for a project where we were going to look at options for sustainably funding watershed management. And so Public Sector Consultants was hired through a competitive process to assist us with that. So in phase one, they evaluated some alternative funding approaches. We had prescribed some of those that we wanted them to look at within the scope of work. Others they came up with on their own. So then during phase two, we retained their services to have some facilitated focus groups with our West Michigan watershed partners to really look at those options that were presented in phase one and come up with a strategy to move forward. So there was a lot of conversation to come up with a consensus strategy that ended up being kind of a hybrid of the originals that they proposed. So we're looking at the option of property owners donating to a water quality fund through their property tax bills. And then that fund would then be managed by the regional planning organizations or a similar entity. So then moving that initiative forward, we had a laundry list of items that Public Sector Consultants had suggested that we do in order to move forward. And so one was assessing the public perception. Are people willing to participate in a program like this? What's the support? And the team felt that that was really important to do first before we move to crafting legislation. So that's what this phase 3 was and what the presentation is today, the results of this public opinion poll. So why would we want to do a survey? The biggest questions is, again, how receptive would people be to a fund like this? How much would they be willing to donate? Coming up with some kind of a donation, what should we set that at for it to be feasible for people to actually participate? And then also looking at, where do people think we need to make investments? I mean, we know what our watershed management plans say, but what would the public be open to seeing their donations fund? And so Public Sector Consultants has done a number of these sorts of surveys, telephone surveys, and have had really good success rates with those as being a low cost but highly effective way to get information from the public. So with our survey, we had a goal of 800 completed surveys statewide, which is a little bit higher than typical for statewide surveys, but this gave us a margin of error of only 3%. And because of the nature of this project, We wanted to make sure we had opinions of registered voters, so that when we go talk to legislators, we can say this is what your voters say. And then also, we wanted to make sure we were talking to just property owners, since they would be the ones that would be participating in this program. And so then I'm going to go through not all of the questions, but some of them. Before we do that, here's kind of the key findings in the study. So a very high amount of people agree that they care about water quality, which living in Michigan should not be surprising. Also, a high number of people think that we should invest in our water quality. And then when it comes down to the actual donation program itself, 1/3 were willing to donate, which was a lot higher than we expected that number to be. So we were very pleased with that result. And a question was asked about how much people would donate. It was open-ended, the whole gamut of responses, but the median response was $50. So again, I think higher than we anticipated it being. And then beyond the folks that are willing to donate, people were very supportive of the program overall, even if they did not have the financial means or would not donate personally. So that leads to the first question here. So about 60% of the respondents were supportive of this kind of a water quality fund. Again, even though they would not be able to personally contribute. The project team had asked PSC to look at some of the demographics and correlate some of the demographical information with these questions. So this one in particular, it's extended across the political spectrum. So this is really a nonpartisan issue. People care about water quality and funding water quality. We did, since our model is really working at the county level to collect this fund, there could be an option to work at the state level, so we wanted to see what people felt about state versus a county funded program. And so the response rates here were much more friendly toward keeping that money locally as opposed to having a state level program. And there was some impact on party affiliation with that. Democrats were kind of relatively split of whether they were more likely to support it at the state or the county. Republicans were more supportive of that being collected at the county level. About 40% supportive of at the local level, 22% would be more likely to support it at the state level. Again, we asked people, where would they like to see the investments made? So this question was asked, providing these list of options here and then asking them to pick their first and second choices. So the most popular responses were reducing pollution and protecting sources of drinking water. So the sorts of things that we're already doing. But then lower on the spectrum there was public access to recreation opportunities and enhancing public awareness. So then, again, if we have this water quality fund is created and we have the funding, we want to be able to respond to the public's needs and direct that money appropriately. So a series of questions was asked that all had the response, do you strongly agree, disagree, strongly, disagree? And so most of the questions were asked in the positive. This one question was asked in the negative to make sure people were actually paying attention to the question. So this is where we get, that people are or do think that water quality is important by asking it in a negative way. Hopefully that 10% that strongly agree weren't tricked by that. I hope that they were, but so. And then just some of the other questions that were asked. I think this was a little bit surprising to us that people really think that this is a pretty high priority in their community. Only 37% of people thought there were other needs in their community that were more important than water quality. So that sends a pretty strong message that this is important to people. And this is where we kind of get into the, 60% of people thought it was a great program. Only 35% responded that they have the financial means to donate. And again, I don't think that result is surprising, maybe even a little higher than we anticipated. This question for us was really important as a project team, because if this is passed and this becomes a program, we need to encourage people to participate. So that about 60% of people need more information. That's important to us. That's the work that we'll have to do, the boots on the ground, to get people to opt into this program. So we asked PSC to drill down into this as far as looking at the demographics here. So they looked at the group of people that said they would support it, were unsure if they would donate, and needed more information. And the biggest demographic factor there was age. So people 50 and older were more likely to indicate that they needed more information. So that would help make sure that we get our message out to that appropriate group of people. We asked some trust questions. So get some little trust issues to work through here with our local municipalities collecting the funds. And part of this is in the details of how the funding would work. The municipalities would be the ones collecting the money, not necessarily being the ones making the decisions about how that money is spent. We would have public advisory councils that would fulfill that role. So again, I think this kind of goes a little bit more to the public education in explaining the role of the county and how the money would actually be used to increase that level of trust. And so this was one of the summary questions. There certainly is a strong number of people that agree that we need to make this investment. And I found this interesting, that a lot of people really enjoy using lakes, rivers, and streams for recreation, but they didn't feel that we needed to invest more in that. That wasn't a high priority when it came to investing the funds into recreational access. So they must think that we have pretty good recreational access. So these are just the same key takeaways that we went through at the beginning. So what does this really mean for us? We had them kind of look at, if this were to move forward, and just based on the survey results, what would this have the potential to generate? So they looked at, based on census data statewide, 3.8 million households in the state, 71% are owner-occupied, and then the survey results of that, how many are willing to donate, and that median donation value of $50, it could be as much as $47 million statewide that could be generated and available for watershed management. Certainly the survey has some limitations. People may not actually play out what they think they would do at the time that they take a survey, especially this may be a couple years before this is actually an implemented program, and things may have changed. But it still gives us a pretty good sense that there is support to move this effort forward. And I think that is it. So there is the full report of the public opinion poll. There were a handful of copies on the back. I didn't print enough for everybody. I will get it up on our website if you want to see the full results. But I guess the biggest take home is that, again, our project team feels that this is the results were more positive than we anticipated, so we're comfortable moving the initiative forward, and we do still have some funding to support the work that we're doing on this currently. So that's kind of a next step, is trying to find some more funding to support some stakeholder outreach, crafting the legislation, getting that legislation introduced, and then doing the public education component of it. So any questions?
Thank you, Kelly. Sounds like it has potential to bring in a lot of funding for water improvement.
So, yeah, and then I wanted to mention just quickly, at your place settings, you had a reminder about the Watershed Annual Meeting that is next week. Some of you have RSVP'd. If you plan on coming, I would appreciate your RSVP so we have enough refreshments. And then the other piece there, most of you should have received an invitation already to the Green Infrastructure Workshop for Decision Makers. Is a special workshop that we're having at Holland City Hall with Don Carpenter, who is the premier expert in the state of Michigan on green infrastructure. So it's an opportunity to get together with like-minded people and really learn the ins and outs of green infrastructure. So I encourage you to attend that as well.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it. Carolyn.
So, try to keep this brief for you as well. The first item I have for you is we included in your packet a chapter from the long-range transportation plan that we are creating on performance measures. As you are aware, it's almost been about 2 years now that we've really started moving, the state's moving, the federal government is moving to more performance-based planning, and you around this table have voted on different performance measures. I will actually be bringing a safety performance measure, because that's updated annually, to our next meeting on January 6th. So this chapter in the long-range plan really just reviews what those performance measures are that the MACC follows, and kind of just gives an explanation of them. In the long-range plan, we'll also have an appendix that goes in. It's a performance report. That appendix will actually show a little bit more of the data locally. So we'll show you how our pavement is doing, bridges, all the aspects, safety, crash data, stuff like that will go into the appendix for this chapter. MDOT has given us some really great comments that we will be updating on this. They've been really helpful with reviewing all the chapters as they come out. Thank you for that. If you do have any comments, of course, feel free today, or you can always leave an email with me as well. All right. Next up, the PASER report 2019 has been updated with, so this is kind of what it looked like last year. We were able to update it with this year's information. This year we did PASER rating, which is looking again at the pavement quality out there on our roads. This was, we were doing the Ottawa County portion this year. This year we also did local road rating. This report only has the federal aid numbers, but Mara is putting together maps for each one of you based on your township or city that will show your information specifically for your local roads and your federal aid roads. Of course, if you're in the Ottawa County portion, but we'll still have 2018 for the Allegan County portion. Next year's Allegan County's turn. One other thing I wanted to let you know about PASER, typically we rate the roads. In the years past, we had been rating the roads early summer, kind of late spring, right when the program was released and we were able to go out. We got our roads done really fast, and we were so proud of that we were sometimes the first one in the state to be done rating. But there's a downfall to doing that because you can leave out the roads that may be paved that summer yet. So this year, and we are going to continue doing it this way, we are going to wait to rate our roads until a little bit later in the summer once those road projects have already started or have been completed, so that we have a really nice snapshot of what our money has been invested in this, over the summer months. So instead of rating a road a 3 when that summer it's getting completely reconstructed and gets a number 10, we're now capturing that, I think, a lot more. So we're going to continue rating a little bit later in the season so we can capture that. All right, and again, those more specialized focus maps for your township and city should be coming out very soon for you. All right, and lastly, at your place setting, I put a new obligated project list. We do this every year. This is a federal requirement to submit this to FHWA. It shows what projects were obligated this year and the funding. I was just, I guess, a little too on top of things a few weeks ago when I created the list the first time. Since then, some of the funding amounts have been updated. Specifically, there are 2 at the top for, kind of towards the top for railroads. Those numbers were adjusted over the last few months, I think finalized just because we're in this new fiscal year. They're still wrapping things up. Now this should be good to go. And then the last one at the bottom, the trunk line system for Waverly, that number, that final cost was updated since I first created the list. But yep, this will be added to our website to show what was obligated. I do want to note, transit jobs are a little different. So there are multiple funding streams for transit. Some jobs are obligated in a traditional sense, like how we would obligate road projects. There are some transit jobs that aren't obligated in the same traditional sense. So the money is processed differently. So some of the transit jobs, from transit bus kinds of stuff might not be on this list. It doesn't mean that we don't have money for it or it wasn't spent. It's just a little different the way it works through the system. All right.
Thank you, Carolyn. Tyler,
Yes.
what's new?
Nothing yet. Really not too much of an update. Just kind of wrapping up projects around for the rest of the year. Obviously kind of switching into winter mode, getting snow plows ready. Some have been ready already. Aside from that, really, I don't have any more information about any of the projects left in the area. The only other comment on that is Carolyn and MACC have done a good job with these chapters, the long-range plan. It's no easy task, and performance measures especially is a very new and very complicated subject, so I think they've done a very good job with it.
It's good to hear, Tyler. Appreciate it. Yep. Kelly and Carolyn, I apologize. We rushed you. I'll try and make up for it at some point, but thank you. All right, administrative issues. Executive director search. Your executive committee received 38 applicants for the position as director. We narrowed it down to 4 candidates, and about a week and a half ago, we interviewed all 4 candidates, and we have narrowed it down to a single candidate. We are in a process. The candidate has been here every weekend, well, the last 2 weekends, looking at real estate. Had a discussion with him on Friday. He's doing what a person would as they figure out how to move in, is what does a home cost here, what does a home sell for, and he's also looking at how he might transition up here. He's very excited. We are really excited about the candidate, and I think you will be as well. So we're not quite there. The executive committee met just before this meeting. We talked about compensation, so the next step is for us to connect with that candidate, and hopefully we'll bring that back to you on short term. So that's where we're at. Questions on that? Thanks to the executive committee, great people and great interviews. Financial report, Chris Brown has been gone. He was attending a county seminar, so he didn't get the report done. I don't feel sorry for him. The county seminar was in Maui, so what the heck? He probably could have found one in Grand Rapids or something, but he went to Maui. He did show me the preliminary end of the year, and everything looks very good. It will be another good year for the MACC. The MACC Executive Committee, we met and basically narrowed down the finalist for the position, so I did not do an additional report to that. Our meeting was to narrow down the candidates. All right, with that, Linda, thank you for hosting.
Well, everybody, welcome out to Lake Town. Glad you're here. It's been an interesting year for us out here. We've worked both on regular planning and recreational planning, along with some economic development out here. We were able to actually get a grant to purchase some more beachfront. Well, in different spots, I talked to Skip before the meeting, in different spots the beach is disappearing, at least this way. When it does cycle back, we hope, there'll be a little bit more access out in our neck of the woods. We're also working on the shared path on the Blue Star, which is one of those connectors that if you start south, you can make it all the way up to Cadillac. So it's a nice little piece in the middle. We are screaming on residential construction out here. We have, our biggest year was $16 million in construction last year. We're going to beat it this year. And that's saying something when we have 5,500 residents to add that kind of tax base, all in residential. So we're quite excited about that. But it also plays into the fact that the Planning Commission is up to its eyeballs in rewriting the master plan. So it's been a long process, but we hope to have that finished up this year. Finally, one thing on the table here, we have the Felt Mansion just south at Saugatuck State Park. There's some business card size things here. Grab some. Those are free admission during the holidays. Come out there. It is absolutely stunning, especially at night, because it's all lit. The mansion, the chapel, the carriage house. It's absolutely beautiful. The volunteers put at least one, if not 2 Christmas trees in every room. So by all means, take a look at the schedule, grab some of the free admission tickets, and enjoy.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Linda. Any member comments? I think we're good. Our next meeting is on January 6th. We do not have a meeting in December, and that will be in beautiful Holland Charter Township at the Riley Street Fire Station. Okay. All right. The only thing I would mention, I appreciate all the comments today. We were going to do a retreat before Tim Berkman bailed on us. So at some point, we're going to do that administrative retreat. I know this meeting got a little long, but I really appreciate the comments and perspective all of you have. Congratulations, Mayor Box.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your return.
It's a pleasure. Yes, looking forward to it.
All right. With that, we are adjourned.